Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Sales Academy of Capital City College Group. We're looking at sales and coaching models and frameworks in this workshop. When I did it live, I did call it Roadmaps to Success, or something equally as cheesy. And you might recall I shared with you some tools and some, I guess you could call them systems or frameworks for accelerating either your goal setting, your coaching, or your sales process. So there's going to be a few acronyms and a few kind of step-by-step processes that might be worth you getting pen and paper to hand to note them down. So we'll start with goal setting, particularly because it's something that's a big part of goals or success in general, really, whether that be professional success or personal fulfillment. So I want to be looking at covering the importance of goal setting, why it works, which I think is really important because we've all heard that goal setting is something that we should be doing. So I want to look into why it's actually proven to work and help people achieve success. So with that, then I'll be sharing with you 4 different models for either setting goals, coaching yourself or others, and some sales related processes as well, so that by the end of this training you'll know how to set and evaluate your own goals for your own job performance, or for those of you that are in leadership positions or looking to become in leadership positions, how you can set goals more effectively with your colleagues and team members. Okay, so the first question I want to open up with is, why is goal setting important? Okay, we're all told that we should be setting goals. It's a big part of the development industry, and it doesn't matter what you do, what sector you're in, whether in sales or not. At some point in your life you come across people who tell you that you should be setting goals to achieve X, Y, Z. But why? Why should we be setting goals? Okay, seems an innocent enough question, but there's numerous reasons why goal setting is an important thing to help drive you forward in life. One of those things is it helps you measure your progress. It helps you measure how far away you are from getting what you want. Okay, it can help you work out what you really want, but then you got to know whether you're kind of on track to get there. And in doing so, that does a couple of things. One, it creates accountability. You take ownership of goals. Even the actual element of setting a goal helps you kind of take ownership of it and accountability for it, and then therefore you're much more likely to achieve a goal that you set. So you're much more likely to achieve a goal that you set yourself, and then a goal that someone else sets you. But if you don't set a goal at all, you don't really take any ownership of your destiny, so to speak, rather than sound cheesy. Now, if that goal is quite a big ambition, and goals should be ambitious, they should stretch and challenge us. But if it is so big that it seems unattainable and frightening, we won't do anything about it. So it lets you take a big picture, something that you really want in life, and break it down into actionable steps. Okay, it gives you a destination. I think that's pretty obvious. It gives you a point of where you want to go. Otherwise you just kind of float about in limbo. And most of the people who are dissatisfied in their careers or any aspect of their life are the people who haven't done anything about it, because they haven't had that destination. When you set that destination, it gives you motivation and it gives you focus. And those are the 2 skills I think you'll agree that anybody who's been successful, whether they be business people, athletes, parents, artists, whatever it is that gets you off, the people who succeed in those areas are the ones that have focus into what they want. They're motivated, they have that destination, that direction, and they can stay on track. And interestingly, by doing so, it breaks the monotony. So I suggested earlier, those kind of people who just kind of sit in limbo and every day feels much the same. Maybe sometimes we feel like that as well. We feel like, what are we here for? And every day starts to blend into one another. Well, setting goals, having that direction, having that track to go on, and that focus and that motivation, that momentum, that actually helps break the monotony. Because if we don't have something to strive for, then it's very, very easy to fall into someone else's plans. And I always say, if you don't map out your own life plans, the chances are you will fall into someone else's, and they probably don't have much planned for you. Okay, so make sure you set your own goals, otherwise you'll only end up helping someone else to achieve theirs. So why does goal setting? So now we know that it works, but why does the actual act of setting a goal, how does it work? Why is that the thing that we got to do? Well, I really like the image at the back here, by the way. A goal without a plan is just a wish. I've said that a couple of times. I really do agree with it. And a plan without action, again, is just a plan. It's just an idea. Okay. So the idea behind goal setting, why it works, is, for one, it triggers your behavior. Okay. It's very difficult, not impossible, but it's very difficult to set a goal, put it on paper, and then not do anything about it. Now, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of people who have goals and wants and desires and don't do anything about it. So action is important. But the first step is you've got to have the goal in place to know what action to take. And having the goal, if it's a well-formed goal, and that's what we'll be looking at, if it's something that really inspires you, just the act of putting it onto paper, or however you decide to do it, that can actually trigger the behavior itself. Okay, it's not an external thing. We can't make you achieve your goals. It has to be self-driven. So you have to start by setting that goal, and then the behavior will follow. Goals also guide your focus. So we live in an age where there's 1,000,001 distractions, everything from irrelevant social media to KPIs and targets in our job role, and there's so many technologies out there to help us achieve what we want. It's very, very easy in today's fast-paced world to lose track of what we want, or even if we do know what we want, how to get there. Like we are constantly being distracted. But having a goal, and more importantly, or more specifically I should say, having a goal that you can look at and you can tell yourself, or you can get a feel for every single day, helps really guide your focus. So just setting a goal once and then not doing anything about it didn't help anyone. Anyone who's ever achieved a goal has had immediate focus towards it, and they usually have reminders and things to kind of motivate them and nudge them in that direction. So setting a goal will guide your focus, otherwise you're not really going to achieve anything else. And with that, once that focus starts getting into action, you start to get momentum. Now, this is a really interesting one, because once you start to achieve a goal, that behavior starts, that focus is there, and those behaviors start coming into play, and you start moving towards a goal, that momentum just seems to grow. The hardest thing about goal setting is actually getting off the ground. So if that's where you are right now, the hardest part of goal setting is going to be now. It's going to be working out what you want, putting a plan into place, and taking that first step. After that, everything gets easier. It's a bit like, maybe a poor analogy, but it's a bit like running. Yeah, when you're running, the act of running is quite easy, but you use most of your energy on that first step. Okay, so once you start working towards your goal, it gets easier. You get more focused, more of those behaviors start coming into play, you get more momentum, and you get more motivated by it. So just setting the goal isn't enough. You've got to take action. When you finish a goal, and if you ever have finished a goal and completed a goal and reached what you want, and I'm sure most of you have in some way, but there's something really interesting that happens, is that we then feel compelled to keep that momentum going and set new goals. And they may be quite often bigger goals, slightly different goals that are aligned with what we really want. They may be more ambitious. I don't know, it's completely an individual thing, right? But what that does is it starts to breed within you some real desire to just get better. It promotes this self-mastery, and this personal development side of us starts to come to life, and we want to achieve more. We realize that we're capable of doing whatever we set our mind to, and you only really experience that once you've met a goal, right? So once you've met the goal, you feel good and you want to do it again. So you think, okay, I can do this. What can I stretch myself to now? So if there's anything that you currently are a master of, if you think about something that you're damn good at, I don't know if that's a sport, maybe you play an instrument, or you have a hobby or something, that you can say, I'm pretty good at that. Well, you didn't get there overnight, right? You got there in incremental steps. And when you started to become just above average, you then wanted to be good. And then when you became good, you wanted to become excellent. And so you can see how that's worked in everyday life. It's the same within business or anything else. Once you start to achieve, you then have a thirst for achievement. So this idea of it promoting self-mastery, I think, is really interesting. The most interesting thing I think about goal setting is this last one. Goals make us happy. Goals make us happy. So it might sound a little wishy-washy, but there's been some really extensive research done at Yale University by a professor called Laurie Santos, and she's a professor of positive psychology. So she's very much an optimist. She's very positive, very bubbly. She's very much about studying happiness. Okay. Now I think we can all agree that happiness is probably the most important thing in everyone's life. Okay. If you're successful and not happy, you're not successful. Simple as that. You're a failure. Okay, so success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. We want to feel fulfilled, we want to feel happy. And the research shows that people who feel happy, regardless of where they're from, what they do, is the act of goal setting. Setting goals in a very specific way. There's been loads of research done in this, is that the art of setting goals, and it is an art in some instances, the art of setting goals, the art of working towards them, even if we then abandon those goals or don't meet them, the actual act of goal setting is scientifically proven to make us feel happier because it gives us a sense of progress, right? We are a creature that, we have to evolve mentally, psychologically, emotionally. We have to evolve. That's the nature of the human species. And so if you are not progressing in some way, if you're not having that momentum, if you're not having that move forward towards whatever you want, then you are not going to feel very satisfied with yourself or with your career. Progress, even if you are, and those of you that have seen my email signature, you'll start to understand what this means. Even if you're moving at a really slow pace, like 1 millimeter towards your goal every single day, it's still way better than the people who aren't trying. Okay, and it's that very act of moving closer to what you want that makes us happy. So that aside, let's consider what goals you might have achieved. I just want you to think very, very quickly. I don't know why they put these images of people climbing mountains on goals. I had to get a stock image from Google, and it's always some guy who's climbing a mountain and doing a Rocky Balboa. I don't know what that's about. But assuming that you haven't climbed Everest, what goals have you achieved? Think about something that maybe you achieved that you deliberately set out to do. You thought, I'm going to crack this. I'm going to put my mind to this and I achieve this. Or maybe you achieved a goal without even realizing. What I mean by that is that maybe you didn't have a methodology as such that was laid out in a system, and you didn't have like a pin board in your front room to remind you of it. But you achieved a goal. How did it make you feel to achieve that goal? Chances are at the moment when you realize you've done what you set out to do, it feels just really great. Okay, it feels really good. I know that we are in a culture where we are promoted that it's the taking part that counts, and to some extent that's true, but let's face it, we all want to achieve. We are creatures that wish to achieve and strive for success, and in some way, all of you listening to this in some way have achieved and experienced success at some area of your life. And I want you just to think for a moment about a couple of things. One is, how did that make you feel when you got there? And two, how did it feel when you were working towards that goal? Like, there would have been, even unconsciously, some sort of system, some sort of motivation, some sort of reason that drove you to reach that goal. Sometimes we call it our why. It's why you reached that goal. Why didn't you give up? Okay, there'd have been some internal motivator there that is different for everyone, and I just want you to kind of be aware of that for the moment and carry that into the next kind of 40 minutes as I go through these tools and systems. So the first one is one that you've probably all come across before. The age-old goal setting model called SMART goal setting. You can, if this is the first time you're seeing this, then you can have a quick glance to the right and see that SMART is an acronym for goals that are specific, they are measurable, they are achievable, or attainable is actually the phrase I prefer. They are relevant, and they are time bound. Okay. Now, even if you have come across this, because this has been about since the 80s, it's arguably the most well-known of the goal setting methods out there. Even if you have come across this, how often do we really use it? Are we aware of what it is? If someone says, do you know what a SMART goal is? We can say yes, but how often do we really actually set a goal in a way that is systemized in this way? Okay, probably not as often, I would argue, as we should do. So let's look at these one by one, and I just want you to revisit this very, very simple, basic, familiar format for now. We'll move on to some different models later on, but I just want you to think about something that you want and consider whether it fits the SMART criteria. So the S is specific, right? Meaning that the goal is direct, detailed, and meaningful. It's really important to specify exactly what you're looking to achieve. Now, I will tell you that failure to be specific is one of the most common mistakes people make when attempting to set goals. They set vague goals like, I want to lose weight, I want to grow my business, kind of things that aren't what I would define as a well-formed goal, and therefore you don't have that accountability factor. So if you're going to start by saying, I want to lose weight, or I want to grow my business, or I want to get better at this, consider how you can make that more specific. Like, I want to grow my business by X. I want to lose X amount of pounds or kilograms or stone or whatever it is that you measure in. Okay, make sure that there is some sort of number or metric behind it, because that will then make the next step a lot easier, which is to make the goal measurable. So can you quantify that goal? Can you track your progress or success? How will you know when you have reached your goal? There will be some sort of number, figure, KPI metric, some sort of data that will tell you that you're reaching your goal, but ideally before that time comes that you set that goal for completion. So there'll be something that you can look at that can tell you whether you're on track. If the goal isn't measurable, it's impossible to track the progress. Simple as that. So the measurable aspect, it not only allows you to ensure you're on track, but when you see that you're moving towards that, you can see that progress. That provides doses of motivation for you. That's what helps keep you focused. That's what actually makes you happy, that feeling that you're getting closer. Nobody who wanted to lose weight just woke up one day and found that all their weight had fallen off, right? They look in the mirror every day and they kind of feel happier or not so happy depending on their progress towards, oh yeah, okay, I can see that I'm losing weight, and that's what motivates them, right? So to do this, break down your goals into little bite-sized chunks, okay? And consider that question, how will I know that I'm on track or off track, okay? And you want to do that, you want to have a way to do that before you reach the finish line. The A, as I said, I use the term attainable. Some people use the word achievable. I think it's one and the same. Really, you're looking at how realistic is your goal, and also, do you have the tools and resources to attain it? So having big goals is great, okay? If they're ambitious and having dreams, okay, that's very admirable. But if you set the bar too high, that can actually help kind of give you, well, motivation slumps, if you will, because the goal will seem out of reach and it will demotivate you if you set your goal too high, or if you're not in a position to achieve it. So it's very realistic to, well, you've got to be realistic to think about what do I expect from myself or your colleagues. So if you're setting a team goal, you need to consider whether you have the capability, whether you have the capacity. Do you have the knowledge, the finances, the resources, the skills to accomplish the goal? These are kind of things that you kind of really need to think about. I would argue that this is another big failure on part of some companies who set goals without consulting colleagues. So goals will be set at a level that doesn't involve the people actually there to have to achieve the goals. So like, think about the sales manager who sets KPIs or sales figures, which are just ridiculous. They're not really consulting the sales team about what is a reasonable target to aim for. And if you've ever been in that position where your managers come along and there's been this huge sales target hit, and you kind of know, well, that's not really going to be attainable, it just makes you feel really demotivated before you've even started. Not a healthy environment. So if you're moving into a leadership position, involve your team within the goals to make sure they're attainable, because if they play a part in setting their own goals, they're going to be taking more accountability for them. Okay, don't become that sales manager who's got their head in the clouds. The next one is relevant. Now, relevant really means, is the goal kind of, does it have a purpose and an alignment with the company vision? Okay, so once it's specific, you need to make sure that it's either relevant to your role or your team's role, or sometimes the organization in general. Is it actually what the organization is trying to achieve? Does it align with the strategy or the vision? Also consider questions like, are you the right person to accomplish this goal? So while it might be great for the team, it might be great for you and for the organization, are you the right person to be working towards this goal, or is there someone else who's better equipped or that it'd be more appropriate to reach the goal for you? And is this the right time to reach the goal? So at the time I'm recording this, there's a bit of a pandemic in the world where a lot of things within businesses have to change and adapt. And I would argue that there's certain goals that businesses probably shouldn't be setting at this time because they're not going to be, well, they're not going to be attainable really, but they're also not going to be relevant. Okay. And irrelevant goals serve nobody. Okay. You become sidetracked, you become demotivated. Even if you reach your goal, you can become demotivated. So remember this, accomplishing the wrong goal can be more damaging than failing the right goal. If you accomplish the wrong goal, you do more damage than if you fail the right goal. Think about that for a moment. Okay, so now you've got your well-formed outcome, you've got your, skip ahead there, you've got your well-formed outcome. It's very, very specific, and you know exactly what you want. You know how you're going to track and measure it. It's in line with the company's strategy. It meets everything else. Now, when are you going to achieve this? It's vital to set a deadline around all goals, okay? Because open-ended goals, they're almost never met. They slow down overall progress. We procrastinate. We think, oh, okay, you know, we'll do that sometime, whatever. And it's very hard then actually to track your progress without giving it a deadline. Okay, so this is another big failure I see on goals, is that they don't kind of give a deadline, and therefore it's open-ended and it goes on and on and on until eventually they retire and look back and go, oh, I had a goal to do something once. But hold yourself accountable by giving yourself a deadline. Make sure that deadline is achievable. Make sure it's, you know, the right kind of deadline. It can be a week, a month, a quarter. It doesn't really matter what the time frame is, as long as it's realistic. But really, you know, kind of consider, like, when am I going to achieve this? Because if I don't do it before that time frame, if I don't put a time frame in place, likelihood is you will never achieve it. Okay, so create an agreeable time frame. If you're involving other people, make sure that time frame fits other people. Make it realistic, because that is what will create that momentum and accountability, which for goal setting is everything. Okay, so smart goal setting. So what's next? Well, we can make these goals smarter. You probably caught a glimpse of this a moment earlier by adding an E on the end. So there's a couple of extra points on SMART goals that not everybody remembers. So if you are familiar with SMART, maybe you are less familiar with goals that are smarter, the E being of which is evaluate. So this is really making sure that by evaluating your goals every day, you're going to be much more likely to achieve them. Okay, why is that? Well, long-term goals. So depending on the kind of, you know, industry that you're in and the context, yeah, I would suggest that a long-term goal is like 3 or 6 months out. It can be very easy to ignore them or forget about them entirely, maybe, if they aren't evaluated on a regular basis. So again, that doesn't necessarily need to be every day or every week, but periodically, and I would even say frequently, you evaluate your goal. You kind of look at that progress towards that, and you look at those measurements in line with the time frame, and you consider, am I on track? Okay, and you just check in with yourself and make sure that you set up some sort of system for doing it. You give yourself time, make it a habit. Don't ignore this step, because your mind has a very clever way of allowing you to ignore your goals. And if your goal isn't quite on track, if it becomes irrelevant, or if it suddenly becomes like you're not going to meet that time frame, or there's something that doesn't sit right with you, maybe you have set a goal that isn't so smart after all, and you only realize that at the evaluation stage, then you can readjust your goal appropriately. This doesn't mean you abandon it altogether, just means that you change your approach. Okay, if you find yourself pursuing a goal but you're hitting a brick wall, just readjust your method or whatever you're doing to get there. Take, for example, like a plane has to fly from London to Sydney. Okay, it doesn't just take off in the general direction and then hope it just lands on a strip of air, you know, a strip of an airport somewhere. It has to like constantly evaluate its progress and then readjust its approach. You know, it has to take deviations, and it will keep on doing that until it arrives at its destination. So it's the same for your goals. Okay, doesn't mean you throw the goals out and just start all over. It just means that you acknowledge that, hey, I might have set a goal here that's a little bit out of reach, or it wasn't wholly relevant. I can try a different approach until I get closer. So that's why the evaluation stage is so important. If you don't evaluate, you can't really measure your progress, and then you can't really readjust them. So reassess your goals and readjust them. That's kind of an ongoing thing along with evaluation. Once you've set the goal, you kind of add those stages on at a later stage. Okay. So that's SMART goal setting. Again, I'm sure you'd all come across that, but it's important to think about now, okay, am I actually doing those steps when I set goals? Am I doing so with a really clear methodology, or am I just kind of saying, I want this? Okay. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is a goal setting method, if you will, called OSCAR. It builds on a model called GROW model, which you may be familiar with, some of you, and it's quite simply a framework, if you will, in which you can ask yourself or the person that you're working with questions to help uncover how you're going to meet that goal. So for example, let's say you've set a SMART goal and it's the best SMART goal ever. It's really, really specific and measurable and all that kind of stuff. It's a great goal. It's a very, very well formed outcome. Well, unfortunately, the limitations that SMART methodology has is that it doesn't take it any further than that. It doesn't tell you how to get the goal, right? So by asking yourself questions, or again, if you're working with people in a kind of goal setting scenario, if you're in a coaching or mentoring capacity, you need to use this as well. But think about how you can coach yourself. You can ask yourself these questions and go through this process to go, now I've got my goal, how am I going to get there? Okay, because it's not enough just to set goals. You need to have a plan of action about how to obtain them. Okay, so OSCAR, as you can probably ascertain, is another acronym that's normally followed, step by step. Okay, so we start with the outcome. Quite simply, the outcome is the goal. Okay, so you could plug in your SMART goal right here. You determine what it is that you want. You make sure that it's a clear goal. You make sure that it's ecological and it's in line with everything that you need it to be. And you kind of plug in your goal here. So you can't really do OSCAR unless you've got a well-formed outcome in place. So start with your SMART goal and then assess your situation now. So if you're looking to get somewhere, as I say, the outcome is where you want to be. Well, your situation is going to be quite different. Now, it may be slightly different, it may be a lot different, okay? But you're going to be in some sort of different situation, and it's important to recognize, well, where am I now? Okay, where am I now in relation to my goal? Is it way off? Am I hoping to be CEO of my company and I'm just an intern? Okay, now that doesn't mean that it's not an ambitious goal. It just means that your situation is very different to perhaps somebody who's like a head of department or a vice principal or something like that, vice president. So make sure you assess your situation now. C stands for choices, or sometimes it stands for consequences as well. And this is really when you look at, okay, now I know where I want to go and where I am. What pathways are available to me? What are the choices? So you might do like a pros and cons list. This is like weighing up your options, right? Quite simply, how could I potentially get there? And what's really important in this step is that you don't leave anything out. Okay, you kind of, this list could be non-exhaustive, it could go on and on and on. But quite simply, you want to come up with as many choices as you can, and then with those choices, consider the consequences, weigh up the pros and cons, and think about what choices do I have that are appropriate, which ones are not appropriate, and which ones kind of haven't I thought about immediately. So you really want to put some time aside in this step and really look at the big picture. Kind of step out yourself for a minute, get out your own head and look at all the options available to you, because there's never one road to success. And once you do that, then you can move on to what I would consider probably the most important step, is to take action, okay, which is really the decision-making phase of this process. So now you've got all your choices. What a lot of people can do is they can get bogged down with choices. They can think, oh, there's so many options, I'll think about it, and they get drowned out and intimidated by all their options, and they end up not doing anything at all. And that's not healthy. So you really want to make sure that you commit to one of those choices. Now, don't forget that we can evaluate and readjust. Don't be afraid of picking the wrong choice. Be afraid of not picking anything at all. Okay, so many people concern themselves with choosing the right option to success, but really the worst thing you can do is not make a decision. If you don't make a decision, that is making a decision. Get your head around that. Not making a decision is making a decision. Okay, it's better that you take action now and you realize in that course that maybe you picked the wrong thing than to not choose anything at all. Now, I'm not saying rush into anything headstrong without considering it. That's why we look at the consequences, right? But make an educated guess and then just go with your gut instinct, and yet weigh it up, okay? And just go with what feels right, okay? But it's really important that you make some commitment to yourself to do something. Otherwise, you go through all this process, and again, it happens in the action phase. And lastly, this one's quite simply when you review these goals. So you can develop a plan like a CPD plan to formally review this, but quite simply, you want to check in with yourself periodically to make sure, it's a bit like the evaluation stage of SMART, make sure that you're kind of on track. Okay, because you don't want to get near the finish line of your goal to realize that you've been heading in the wrong direction and you've completely missed the target, right? So make sure you set up periodic reviews. It may be monthly, weekly, daily, whatever it is for you. It depends on the length of the goal, right? But make sure you kind of check in with yourself every now and then and go, okay, where am I? Do I still have that same accountability I had when I started the goal? If not, I need to go back to my why. Think about why I wanted to do this, but make sure you review it so that if you did pick the wrong thing in the action stage, you can do something about it. Okay, so that's Oscar. For those of you that are wondering, maybe some of you are too young to remember who the chap there on the right is. That's Oscar the Grouch. Apparently he lives in a bin. Sesame Street was never my thing. I was more of a Muppets guy, just more of a Muppet in general. So I want to talk to you about the SCORE model. So you'll notice that I've put that this is a coaching model, and there is a reason why I'm sharing this with you. This is a framework, again, a bit similar to Oscar. It's a bit of a framework for coaching individuals, whether they can even be yourself or sometimes even clients or team members, around what they want and what they are looking to get out of a coaching session, or what they want to uncover their outcomes. And what's really interesting about the SCORE model is that it's what we call non-linear, which means unlike SMART and Oscar, it doesn't have to be followed in the order of SCORE. You can go sort of like back and forth depending on how the conversation evolves. It's just a criteria that you should be discussing with your coachee or with your team member. Okay, so this was introduced in the 80s by a consultant called Robert Dilts, and I just think this is really, really powerful, and there's a reason why I'm showing you this one. So we'll go through them in order for argument's sake. So we start off with symptoms. Okay, symptoms being, what is the problem? Okay, so for example, how do you set a goal towards what you want unless you're unhappy with where you are now, right? So at some level, whenever we have goals or a desire to set goals, we are somewhat dissatisfied with where we are now to some degree. And there is a potential problem that we're trying to deal with. And symptoms is really uncovering what it is that tells us there is a problem. So, what is the problem that is occurring? Is it my income? What is it about my relationships, about my team, about how my process, whatever it might be? What is the problem itself? Okay. The next one is cause. So this is when we explore, again, in a collaborative way, what is causing that problem. Okay, it's not enough that we just identify what the problem is. We want to get behind that problem and figure out what is causing that, what is the root cause, okay, and do something known as a root cause analysis, or at least explore what might be behind those symptoms. Okay, this is where you want to dig really, really deep. And then comes what you might be surprised to find is the outcome. Okay, so this might be where you then revert to something like Oscar or something like another GROW model or something like that. So the outcome is quite simply what position does the coachee want to be in? What do they want to achieve? And sometimes a really good question to ask at this stage is, what would you like instead? Okay, because they would have spent some time talking to you about their problems and what's causing them, and simply asking someone, so what would you like instead, can really help them really think about how they can move away from talking about the bad stuff and start thinking about potential solutions. Okay, and you might need a model to help define that outcome, but I think at some level most people have an idea of what they want to achieve. And then once you've done that, you can move on to discussing resources. Resources referring to tools, knowledge, technology, people, skills, finance, whatever it might be. What do they have at their disposal? What do they already have at their disposal to help them achieve their goal? Or what do they have access to? Okay, and if there's resources that they don't have, you can then discuss ways that they can tap into resources. And lastly, you want to talk to your coachee about the effects of achieving that goal. So we're looking at positive effects mainly. What is the positive effects of achieving that goal? What will it do for them when they achieve that goal? And hopefully we're looking for, it's going to make them feel good, it's going to make them more money, it's going to make them more successful, it's going to be whatever floats their boat. But we also want to consider if there are any negative effects, okay, any byproducts of achieving their goal. What will that change within their system? And we need to kind of be aware of any hidden problems that might surface, purely so that we can inoculate against them, so that we can tackle them there and then. Because if we are talking to people about change, and that is definitely what a coaching model should look like, we're talking about changing someone's situation. Although we're hoping that most of the time it's going to create pleasure, there may be a small bit of pain that comes along with it, or small obstacles or problems, and I just think it's worth addressing them head on there as well. So we're looking mainly for positives, I will agree, but it's worth thinking about, okay, let's say if you achieve this goal, what is the worst thing that can happen? And it's a very sensitive question, but I think it's one that needs to be asked and considered in a session. So why am I showing you this? Well, for those of you that are in leadership capacities where you want to become more of a coach and look after your team members, I think you'll find this quite useful. But consider this. Could this be used as a sales tool? Could this be used to perhaps drive a conversation between you and your prospects around their problems? Because your prospects have symptoms, right? They have problems, we know this, and they have things that cause those problems, and they have things that they would like instead, and maybe you are one of those resources. So I want you to consider that in today's market, we have to be way more consultative and almost like coaches to our clients. So if you use this as a sales qualifying process, if you use this as a framework to ask your prospect questions, so tell me, Mr. Prospect, what is the question? What's causing those problems? What do you want to achieve, and what have you got already that might help you, or what do you need from us to help you achieve that? And then what will achieving that outcome do for you? Can you see how this will help you add value to the interaction before you even talk about your product or service? And if you have the ability to ask powerful questions that really get a prospect to dig deep within themselves and look at their business, you are immediately positioning yourself as the expert in your field that you deserve to be, rather than just pushing a product down their throat. Okay, get them to really dig deep, peel back those layers of that onion, to use the cliche. And I think the SCORE model is a really good way to do that with your prospects. Okay, so as a quick overview of that. Symptoms, what is telling you that there is a problem? What's the cause of that problem? What is the goal then that you're trying to achieve instead of this problem you're facing, Mr. Client? Resources. Is there anyone in-house that could help you solve this problem? Now that might seem like a counterintuitive, but please be aware that that may well be one of the effects. And if they say that, oh, actually, yeah, we might have some resources inside, then that's a conversation that you want to have there and then with the client, so that you can encourage them to be supportive or find out whether those resources are going to be enough. And of course, you are a resource as a consultant, with a product or a service, you are a resource as well. And then the effect as well, that's really important to say that, hey, if we implement a solution or we sell you a product, what's going to be the long-term outcome of this? What's going to be the results of this? How is this going to ripple throughout the business? Because if there's problems, If we're going to get kickback somewhere down the line, I want to know about it so we can perhaps prevent that from happening. Okay, so that's kind of when you're unearthing objections early on, which is probably where you want to be. You don't want to wait for clients to voice objections. You want to tackle them head on. So that's the SCORE model. And last, we have CRAFT. So CRAFT model is purely really designed for those of you that are presenting. And by presenting, I mean you may be speaking on the phone, but you may be speaking to a number of people, whether it be on stage in some sort of presentation like public speaking, or you may be in front of a boardroom, or I don't know how you present. It really depends on how much of presenting plays in your role. So the CRAFT model was observed in some key speakers who were really able to rally crowds together, who were really influential and persuasive. A lot of politicians kind of follow the CRAFT model. Whether they do so intentionally, I'm not sure, but it was certainly been observed in politicians who have been known to be good speakers. So Abe Lincoln and Barack Obama and Maggie Thatcher, that kind of thing. It's another acronym. So it's a 5-step process for how to have impact when you present. So the first thing you want to do to your audience is create credibility. So you might create credibility by opening with a statistic or a fact or some sort of industry knowledge they have. You want to come across as an authority. You want to use social proof. You want to use good tonality. You need to really know what you want to achieve here. Okay, if you know what you want the other person to do, it gives you a goal, right? So this is where you really present yourself as an expert within your field and a force to be reckoned with. So you might want to give yourself an introductory and tell them about some of the achievements that you've done previously. Okay, so this is where you inflate your ego to some degree. Then the next step is to build rapport. Okay, so there's a rapport building webinar that should be online very soon that we talk about this. But really, this is about building rapport with your whole audience, because that will increase responsiveness and understanding. So you want to be open and you want to be engaging, but you want to use positive language, positive body physiology, positive tones. You want to refer to universal experiences. You want to use empathy. You want to match and mirror. You want to do whatever you can to not just be someone that is an authority, but someone that is relatable as well, somebody that they can connect with as an audience, which is very, very different to doing it one-on-one. So think about how you want to be perceived as a speaker. And then we want to talk about something known as away froms. Now, away froms are quite simply problems that your client faces, things that they want to move away from, right? So here you can use either some effective questioning to uncover those pain points and challenges, or if you've got enough credibility and enough rapport, you can make some pretty safe assumptions about their challenges based on general challenges that your product and service solves. Okay, so the reason that you have a product or a service is likely because you have clients that have those problems, and they should be to some extent problems that businesses and decision makers can relate to. So if you kind of can announce those without having to dig for them, which you would probably have to do in a, you can't question 100 people if you're in public speaking. You want to voice some common problems that you see happening within the marketplace. And instead of doing so, that will actually build your credibility in itself. And then you want to talk about the future implications. The future implications is where you emphasize what will happen if people do not make a change. Okay, so you're kind of looking to ramp up the pain a little bit here, the need to move away from those problems. So you might talk about the future and go as far into the future as you need to in order to get them to realize the seriousness of their problems. So you can use past experiences, like clients that didn't do something about their problems and now in a worse state. So you can illustrate how problems can escalate over time, but you really want to talk about to your audience what will happen if this situation continues, this situation being a problem that they have. If we don't do anything about this, we will be in a dire strait. And so you can kind of see how politicians use this when campaigning. Okay, if we don't do something about social issue, this will happen further down the line. And lastly, once you've done that, once you've built up that that pain, if you will, about the problems they have now and the problems they have in the future. The last step is really when you start to move them towards your solution. So again, speakers do this and kind of say, well, I have the answer, what you need to do is X. And you've got people geared up and really look like they're ready to hear it. So this is you present your proposal or your solution, you link it to both those away from motivations or sometimes towards motivations, which are goals that your client is trying to face. Okay, so not all clients have problems that they're ready to deal with, but most of them will have goals that they're moving towards. So they're either looking to move away or towards something, and your solution should ideally help them achieve that. So once you've built up the implications of them not doing anything and they're ready to take action, it's the perfect time where you can address your solution. You can present it in a way that your audience are ready to hear it. Okay, so I don't imagine for a moment that many of you do present to large numbers, but you never know. And that's about it really, guys. So what we've really learned is 4 models: SMART, OSCAR, SCORE and CRAFT. I'm certainly aware that one of those you probably will have known before, because it's certainly more common. I'd like to think that 1 or 2 of the others might have resonated with you in some way. Depending on what you sell and how you sell it, I'd like to think that you might be able to use those moving forward again for yourself, if you are into personal development, for your colleagues, if you're trying to help them grow, or for your clients, because ultimately those are the people that we're looking to serve. And I think there's use for some of those tools if you want to be seen as a consultant. I mean, even helping clients set SMART goals is something that potentially adds value to them, even though they might know it. It's something that helps clarify that, hey, I'm with you to help you achieve your goals. I'm not just trying to flog you a service or a product. I'm actually trying to help you achieve an outcome here. So those are some of the models. Now there's countless models for sales and goal setting out there. Here's just a few, but please, if you are interested in this, go out there and find something that resonates with yourself. I'm a big fan of making sure that it's the right fit for you. There isn't one size fits all when it comes to this kind of thing. So make sure that you, if you are setting goals or realizing that you do need to set goals, then you find a model or a framework which is best for you. And I hope that has been useful. So thank you very much for this time. So that is sales and coaching models and frameworks. Please consider how you can use those to help your clients as well, rather than just yourself. Try them out, and I hope they help you, lead you some way to success. And most importantly, as always, have fun setting your own goals and make sure that you achieve them. And in the process, look after yourself and each other. And I'll see you on the next workshop. Take care. Bye-bye.